Hi, my name's Riley. I paid for my sister's dream wedding with the money I was saving to fix my eyes that were slowly going blind. I flew 9 hours to be there, sat in the dress I made by hand, and she pointed near the kitchen trash cans and said, "That's your seat. No welcome, no thank you, just a corner between used plates and forgotten trays." But it wasn't the insult that broke me. It was realizing they never saw me to begin with. And when the truth came out, when the photos went viral, was it still my silence they remembered? Or the quiet way I burned it all down? What happens when the invisible sister refuses to disappear? I got the call while I was sitting in my doctor's office, the air faintly antiseptic, the blinds drawn against an unusually bright Oregon sun. The specialist had just handed me my chart, the red markings on my optical scans more vivid than the daylight outside. He said it gently, but firmly. If I didn't schedule the surgery soon, I could lose partial vision permanently. Time, he explained, was not on my side. I nodded, clutching the paper in my lap. My fingers curled slightly over the edge, crinkling the corner. I was still digesting the weight of his words when my phone buzzed. A familiar name lit up the screen. Callista. My sister. I hesitated before answering, feeling that twist in my gut I always got before talking to her, the kind of twist you get when you know you're about to agree to something you don't want to, something that will cost you more than just money. Finally, I've been trying to reach you, she chirped. Her voice was full of that high-gloss energy that only came out when she wanted something or was thrilled about her own life. She didn't wait for me to reply. I have amazing news. The venue is secured. The Hawthorne Estate. It's absolutely stunning. Marble everywhere. Chandeliers the size of trucks? It screams legacy. I barely had time to process her excitement before she shifted the weight onto me. But we're just a bit short for the down payment. Julian's parents took care of catering and flowers. I mean, thank God, right? But the venue is the crown jewel, you know, and we can't afford to look like amateurs. I opened my mouth to mention the surgery, to say, I've got something urgent going on too. But I didn't. Instead, I listened. I want you there, Really. It wouldn't be complete without you, she added, lowering her voice like she meant it. It sounded rehearsed, practiced, but still, I wanted it to be true. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the letter from my eye specialist on one side and my online banking pulled up on the other. I stared at the numbers. I thought about my savings, the surgery, the time I'd need to recover. Then I thought about Callista in her lace gown, smiling at me from under a veil of gratitude. I thought about my mother standing proud beside her favorite daughter. I thought about being included, seen. I wired the money. She never asked how much, never asked what it cost me. You're the best, she said over text. That was all. 2 weeks passed quickly. I packed my suitcase slowly, carefully folding my deep navy dress that I'd saved for the occasion. I had a matching shawl and low heels. Simple, but elegant. The dress reminded me of dusk in Ashland. Quiet and full of promise. The airport was crowded. The lights were sharp. My eyes watered more than usual as I moved through security. I rubbed them gently, knowing the dryness was worsening. I blinked against the brightness, silently noting how much more sensitive they'd become in recent days. The flight was long, 9 hours. I was stuck between two strangers, one asleep, the other chewing ice with every pop of his jaw. I pressed my temple against the window, eyes closed, trying to forget the weight behind them. When we landed in Atlanta, it was nearly 7:30 p.m., local time. I turned my phone on. No messages. I waited a few minutes, watching travelers rush to loved ones. I looked for my name on any of the little whiteboards drivers held. Nothing. I waited longer. Still nothing. Finally, I hailed a cab. The driver loaded my luggage silently. I gave him the address to the Midtown hotel Callista said she'd booked for me. She'd promised it would be walking distance from the venue. At the front desk, I smiled politely at the receptionist. I believe there's a room under Riley Callan. She typed, frowned, typed again. I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't have anything under that name. Maybe it's booked under a group? I tried Callista's name. Nothing. Julian's? Nothing. I stood there, tired, blurry-eyed, humiliated. My voice cracked when I said, "It's okay. I'll just cover a night myself." The room wasn't cheap, but I had just enough left on my backup card. I signed the form, took the keycard, and forced a smile. In the elevator, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. Wrinkled dress, eyes red, hair a little frizzed at the crown. Not quite the image I'd had in mind when I pictured this trip. Once in the room, I didn't unpack. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared out the window. The city stretched far beyond the glass, twinkling, unfamiliar, fast. I didn't belong in it. A bottle of water sat untouched on the side table. My phone, still silent, blinked once in the dark. I whispered to no one, to the silence, to the night, to myself. I delayed seeing the world clearly, just to be invisible again. Morning light poured into the hotel room like it had somewhere more important to be. I hadn't slept much, maybe an hour or two in spurts, drifting in and out, mind clouded by the dissonance between what I expected and what had happened. When I finally got up, I moved quietly, like I didn't want to disturb the stillness. My dress had stayed on its hanger, safe from wrinkles. I laid it out on the bed, ran my hands over the fabric. The color was deep, navy blue with tiny embroidered details at the hem, subtle but rich, like ocean at night. I'd chosen it to represent grace. I had no way of knowing it would become my armor. I steamed it carefully, styled my hair into a low twist, and applied my makeup with a steady hand. I didn't want to look extravagant. I just wanted to look like I belonged. The hotel lobby was busy. Couples dressed in pastels strolled through with gift bags, making their way toward valet service. I watched as they climbed into luxury SUVs, chatting about the cake, the playlist, the cocktail list. Not one recognized me. I didn't expect them to, not really. By the time I arrived at the Hawthorne estate, a white mansion with high columns and pristine landscaping, my hands had grown cold. I rubbed them together while stepping through the massive front doors. The woman at the entry, clipboard in hand, didn't smile. Name? Riley Callan. She looked down, flicked her eyes across a page, paused for half a breath. Right, this way. I followed her down a long hallway. Not toward the ceremony hall or reception ballroom, but deeper into the building, where the glamour faded and fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. I assumed we were taking a back route, to surprise the guests maybe, or to wait in a staging area before family was introduced. We passed the catering corridor. The sounds of clattering dishes echoed from behind the swinging doors. When she stopped abruptly near a narrow alcove, I waited for her to turn back and redirect. She didn't. She pointed at a folding chair. It sat next to two wheeled bins, one for trash, the other for used dinnerware. That's your seat. I blinked, confused. I think there's been a mistake. I'm the bride's sister. The woman's tone never changed. I just follow the chart. This is the space marked for you. I stood there, unmoving. The hum of industrial refrigeration units blended with distant violin music. I could hear a string quartet warming up somewhere in the main ballroom, muffled through the walls. And then, as if on cue, Callista appeared from the opposite end of the hallway. Her ivory dress shimmered under the corridor's light. She walked like someone who was used to eyes following her. When she saw me, her perfect brow pinched. Riley, why aren't you seated? She asked through a half-whisper, half-hiss. Where? I asked. You mean this? By the trash? Her eyes darted toward the bins, then back to me. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. Look, there were some last-minute changes. Julian's family had some VIPs show up. I didn't know until this morning. You couldn't find one chair up front. I wired the deposit for this entire place. She exhaled sharply. Please don't make a scene. This day is important to me. Can we talk about this later? Later? My voice didn't rise, but my words held their ground. You sat me with the garbage, Callista. Her jaw tensed. This is temporary. No one's going to notice. But I noticed. Riley. She said my name like it tasted bad. Please, just stay calm. for me. I said nothing, just nodded slowly and took my seat. I didn't sit because I was weak. I sat because I needed time to process the sheer absurdity of the moment, and because, deep down, I knew this wasn't spontaneous. You don't forget to seat your sister unless forgetting is convenient. The ceremony music began soon after. I heard guests being ushered to their seats, the rising melody of the processional. From where I sat, I could see the reflection of flickering candles in a hallway mirror. Voices murmured. Laughter trickled in like water under a locked door. I sat still, composed. They didn't know it, but their decision had clarified something in me. This wasn't about oversight or miscommunication. It was exclusion, carefully packaged as logistics. About halfway through the ceremony, I saw my mother pass by. She looked at me, then kept walking. Not a pause, not a word, just a shift in her gaze, like spotting a misplaced item at the store, not valuable enough to retrieve. I watched her go. Uncle Theo, a kind man who once took me to my first baseball game, waved at me from the foyer. It was a small wave. He didn't come over. I understood in that moment that I wasn't simply being ignored, I was being erased. Eventually, I heard applause. Then music swelled again. The ceremony had ended. I heard someone say, "That was magical." Another voice, "Callista looked like a goddess." I didn't see her walk down the aisle. I didn't see the kiss. I didn't hear their vows. I sat next to trash cans while my sister married into a family who hadn't seen a single photo of me. A young server passed me on his way back to the kitchen. He saw me, hesitated, then looked away. He didn't mean harm. He was following instruction, just like the woman with the clipboard. For a while, I sat with my hands folded in my lap. The scent of overused floral arrangements mixed with food scraps and industrial sanitizer. My heels pinched, my back ached. But I stayed there, because there was nowhere else to go. When the music started again, probably for the reception entrance, I leaned back against the wall, closed my eyes, and whispered to no one but the air around me. I gave up my sight for this. She gave up seeing me. I stayed in that hallway until the music faded and guests began to shift toward the reception room. The servers moved past me briskly, heads down, balancing trays of glasses and hors d'oeuvres. I stood, my body stiff from sitting too long on that hard metal chair, and began to walk. Not toward the ballroom, I wasn't ready for that, but toward the far hallway where the guest book table was set up along with a display of family photos. I kept close to the walls, careful not to bump into anyone. A young planner eyed me briefly as I passed but didn't speak. Maybe she assumed I was someone's assistant or a vendor checking on things. The irony of being invisible in a room full of people dressed to be seen didn't escape me. The photo display spanned 3 long tables. Neatly framed images of Callista beaming from ballet recitals, high school prom nights, college graduation, and vacation photos from Europe. I scanned each row, searching for some trace of myself, something to prove I existed in her story. I found 3 photos that included me. In one, I was barely visible behind a tree branch on a family picnic. Another was a Christmas shot where I stood at the edge, half cut off by the frame. The third was a group photo from our dad's retirement party. I remembered standing beside Callista that day, but in this picture, I was almost in the background, blurred, the focus clearly on her. A hush fell over the room as the reception program began. A screen lowered near the head table, and the lights dimmed slightly. Curious guests gathered around. I moved to the far side, keeping a safe distance, close enough to hear but far enough to stay out of sight. The slideshow started with baby photos. Callista wrapped in pink blankets, her first steps, her ballet recital at age 6. Every milestone was met with soft laughter, warm sighs, and polite applause. Pictures of our parents holding her, birthday parties with elaborate cakes. I watched as image after image painted the story of a cherished only child. Except she wasn't. We had shared those birthdays. I had been there for the beach vacations and school plays. I remembered holding her hand before her first recital, helping her zip up her dress when Mom was too busy getting her own makeup done. But in this carefully curated montage, I was a ghost, a misplaced shadow in the background. Or worse, absent altogether. The final slide read, "To the most beautiful journey shared with the people who made her who she is today. We love you, Callista." I stood still. People around me clapped, wiping their eyes. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the welcome table and picked up a printed brochure, a glossy trifold program outlining the evening's timeline, family names, acknowledgements. I flipped through it slowly, scanning the names. Father of the bride, William Rames. Mother of the bride, Isolde Rames. Maid of honor, Natalie Dawson. Special thanks to Julian's parents, Callista's friends, and our incredible family who raised and supported our only daughter with unwavering love. My name wasn't there, not once, not under family, not as a guest, not even in the printed thank you list. I wasn't forgotten, I was erased. My fingers tightened on the edge of the program. The slick paper crinkled slightly, and I caught myself before tearing it in half. Instead, I folded it carefully and slipped it into my purse. I backed away from the table, down a quieter hallway, past the catering door I knew all too well from earlier. I found a spot near a column and leaned against it. My breath came in shallow waves. I didn't want to draw attention. I didn't want anyone to see the emotion climbing up my throat. But memories didn't ask for permission. I was 12 again. It was my birthday. We were at a bowling alley. I remember the candle flames flickering as I leaned forward to blow them out. Callista, 6 years old and full of sugar, leaped in front of me at the last second and did it instead. Everyone laughed. Even Mom. Especially Mom. I stood frozen, the camera flash catching my confused, forced smile. Later that night, my dad gave me a hug and whispered, "You're still the one who made the wish." I had forgotten that moment until now. But here, standing alone in this hallway with the scent of roses and shrimp cocktail hanging in the air, it came back with the force of a wave. This wedding wasn't just a reflection of Callista's success. It was a confirmation of my exclusion, a public declaration that I had never mattered. Not really. Footsteps approached. 2 women in silk gowns, maybe Callista's friends or co-workers, walked by, chatting softly. "I thought she said her sister couldn't come," one of them said. "Maybe she's part of the staff?" the other replied, sipping her drink. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My chest tightened. I pressed my hand against my sternum as if I could steady the ache with just pressure. I wasn't angry at them. They didn't know better. They were just reacting to the narrative they'd been given. A narrative Callista wrote line by line with every omission, every edited photo, every silence. I stayed there a while, maybe 15 minutes, maybe longer. I didn't cry. Eventually, I straightened my back and walked, past the display table, past the bar, past the glowing chandeliers and the carefully curated floral centerpieces. I returned to the seat beside the kitchen doors, the one she'd assigned me. My feet ached, but I sat with intention now, not resignation. They were trying to erase me, so I'd make sure I was remembered differently. I stayed seated long after the reception faded into background laughter and silverware clinks. At some point, I checked my watch. It was close to 10 p.m., though the clamor outside the kitchen doors made it feel like time had stalled. I waited until I couldn't take the smell of stale wine and greasy linens anymore. When I finally stood, my body ached in places I hadn't felt in years. I slipped out unnoticed, which wasn't hard. No one was looking for me. The Uber ride back to the hotel was quiet. I gave the driver a simple Midtown Marriott, and he didn't ask questions. My voice was flat, and my reflection in the backseat window looked like a woman who had forgotten how to speak up for herself. The room hadn't changed since I left that morning. The same untouched bottled water sat by the bed. I stepped inside and closed the door softly, like I was afraid of waking something. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was sharp, like glass. I didn't undress. I sat on the edge of the bed, dress still on, heels kicked off near the door. The bottom hem of my navy gown brushed against my shin as I folded forward. It carried the faint scent of kitchen grease and a stronger hint of floral perfume that wasn't mine. I'd walked past someone earlier, someone who had muttered under her breath as I passed. "Did the kitchen staff get new uniforms?" That's what she'd said. She wasn't joking. She was just stating it, like it was fact. Like that's who I was. The dress had taken weeks to make. Miss Edna from Ashland, who'd done bridal tailoring for 30 years, had poured care into every seam. We picked the thread together. She adjusted the neckline 3 times to make sure it sat just right on my shoulders. We'd laughed in her tiny shop over weak coffee and her rusted sewing machine. It wasn't just a dress. It was a moment, a decision, a piece of who I was. But to that woman, it was a costume. And to my sister, it was forgettable enough to be sat beside trash bins. I stood slowly and walked to my suitcase. I unzipped the side pocket and pulled out a worn leather pouch. It had belonged to my dad. He'd given it to me on my 21st birthday, said it was for important things. I hadn't opened it in a while, but something told me I needed to tonight. Inside, among old receipts and a grocery list I never used, was an envelope I didn't recognize. The handwriting on it stopped my breath. Riley, for later, it read. It was my father's handwriting. I sank back onto the bed, envelope in my lap. My fingers shook slightly as I opened the flap. The paper inside was folded neatly. A letter, short. The ink was slightly smudged, but the words were clear. My girl, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. I never got to say everything I meant to, but I hope this helps fill in the quiet parts. I left something behind for you. A savings account. It's in your name alone. I made sure of it. I always knew you were the one who watched quietly, who stayed steady. You didn't need attention. You carried weight without asking for credit. Don't let anyone make you small. You're not invisible to me. Love you always, Dad. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just stared at the paper, read it again. Then again. I realized something sharp and hard in that moment. My mother had known about this. She'd had this envelope all this time. It had likely been tucked into my old scrapbook, one she kept in the hallway closet back home. The same closet she controlled like a museum. She hadn't given it to me. Not after he died. Not after I moved out. Not during hard seasons when that kind of reassurance would have changed the entire shape of me. She'd chosen silence. And now, standing in this overpriced, impersonal hotel room, smelling like event food and lies, I felt the weight of that silence settle around me like a second skin. She didn't forget. She chose not to remember me. You buried me with your silence, I whispered into the stillness. The clock on the nightstand read 11:38 p.m. I stood, folded the letter gently, and placed it back inside the pouch. Then I walked to the desk, pulled out my laptop, and powered it on. There was only one name I typed into the browser. Ezra Van Trell. I still had his card from earlier that afternoon. He was Callista's photographer. Quiet, serious, observant. He had seen me sitting there near the kitchen doors. He had paused. His lens had hovered. He knew. His website was sleek, modern, wedding portfolios, testimonials, pricing tiers. I clicked the contact tab. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to say. I just knew I needed him to hear it. Maybe he would understand. Maybe he'd captured what no one else was willing to admit, that I had been there. I was real. I mattered. I hovered over the keyboard. Then, without overthinking it, I typed, "Hi Ezra, this is Riley Callan. I was at the Ramscroft wedding today. I'd like to speak with you about a potential commission, separate from the event. Private. Let me know if you're available to talk tomorrow. My cell is below." I hit send. Then I closed the laptop slowly, got up, and drew the curtains. Outside, the city lights blinked against the black sky, pretending to shine. But inside this room, I saw something clearly for the first time in days. He saw me. He saw all of it. I woke before sunrise. Not from noise, not from light, just from the weight of knowing. My body didn't feel rested, just no longer willing to lie still. I lay there in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the central air. There's a silence that comes after betrayal. It isn't peaceful. It's surgical, precise, cold, and sharp where it needs to be. After I showered, I sat at the desk, robe wrapped tight, hair still damp. The morning light began creeping through the sheer curtains, turning the sterile cream walls a soft gold. I opened my laptop, clicked into my email. There it was, an automated receipt from the event planner's office, the kind of email most bridesmaids would ignore, most family would never see. But I wasn't most family. Subject: Invoice confirmation, Hawthorne Estate. Client: Riley Callan. Amount paid in full, $48,000. Status: closed. That name, mine, bold and plain at the top. Not Callista, not Julian. Mine. I didn't blink. They used my name to pay, then buried my presence under the linens and logistics. I scrolled further down. No mention of me in the acknowledgement section. Not even a thanks to our generous family. I wasn't surprised, just newly grounded in the truth of it. My gaze drifted to the corner of the desk, where a small folded paper sat tucked beneath the lamp. My speech. The one I wrote when Callista insisted I say something sweet during the toast. I'd drafted it weeks ago. Spent hours fine-tuning the balance between humor and heart. She never let me read it. The night of the wedding, I'd asked when my turn would be. She gave me a tight-lipped smile and said, "We ran out of time. You know how things go." I picked it up and unfolded it now. The words looked foreign to me, like something a much softer woman had written. To my sister Callista, who has always been a star in every room. I stopped there. That version of me didn't exist anymore. By 10 a.m., I was fully dressed, hair combed back into a neat low bun, no makeup, just clarity. I picked up the phone and dialed the number on Ezra's card. He answered on the second ring. His voice was calm, like he had just stepped out of a darkroom. Ezra Van Trell. "Hi," I said. "This is Riley Callan. I was at yesterday's wedding." There was a pause. Brief, but meaningful. "I remember," he said. "How can I help?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead. I just told him plainly, "I'd like to commission a separate gallery, curated, private, password protected." He was quiet again. Then, "That's not something I usually do." "I'm willing to pay 3 times your rate," I replied. Now he was listening. "I'm not asking for the couple's images. I don't want the ceremony or the dancing or the staged kisses. I want the truth. I want the hallway, the seat, the context. I want what you saw when no one else was looking." He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He had seen it too. Photographers know when a story's been cut out of the frame. "Okay," he said softly. "Let's do it right." By noon, I stood once more in the foyer of the Hawthorne Estate. The weekend staff had begun clearing out the remnants of the event. The scent of roses and champagne had been replaced by lemon polish and the faint sting of bleach. Ezra arrived with his camera gear strapped to his shoulder and a steel professionalism that gave me room to breathe. We didn't talk much. He led me back to the corridor near the kitchen, where the metal bins had been pushed aside but not removed. The folding chair was still there. I didn't sit right away. "I want to do this on my terms," I said. He nodded, adjusted his lens. I sat in the same seat, but this time I didn't shrink. My posture was deliberate. My chin lifted. I looked directly at his lens. "Don't make me look pitiful," I said. "Make me look undeniable." He clicked twice, adjusted his angle. We moved through the shots slowly, each frame capturing the setting, the emotion, the quiet power. He took a photo through the cracked kitchen door, framing my figure against the blurred backdrop of staff clearing dishes. He caught the reflection of my face in a silver cart. He knelt low, capturing the juxtaposition of my heels beside a trash bin that had held half-eaten filet mignon the night before. Every shot told a truth the event had tried to erase. When we finished, Ezra didn't offer me platitudes. He just said, "I'll send you the gallery link this evening." I nodded. That was enough. Back at the hotel, I changed out of the dress I'd worn and slipped into jeans and a sweatshirt. Something about cotton after satin felt like reclaiming reality. Then I sat down at the desk and opened a new Word document. I typed without pausing. To Callista Rames. Subject: Financial adjustment, Hawthorne Estate. Callista, as you know, the venue for your wedding was paid in full via my personal account. totaling $48,000. This contribution was offered in good faith with the understanding of inclusion, acknowledgement, and basic respect. Given the events of your wedding, specifically my exclusion from guest lists, seating, program materials, and formal recognition, I am rescinding this as a gift. You now owe the full amount. A gift requires acknowledgement. Yours did not. This amount is now classified as a debt, payable in full within 30 days. Regards, Riley Callan. I attached a copy of the venue's invoice with my name on it. I didn't scream, I didn't curse, but I made sure they'd remember who paid for the party. The email went out at 6:47 p.m. I didn't wait for a reply. I closed the laptop, folded the paper copy of the invoice, and slipped it into a manila envelope addressed to Callista's apartment. No note, no explanation, just the debt, documented and dated. Then I stood by the window of my hotel room and watched the sunset behind the Atlanta skyline, shadows crawling between high-rises like ink in water. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't even angry anymore. Something in me had turned, settled into a still, clear space where shame had no oxygen. Later that evening, I opened my phone, intending to scroll through mindless photos or maybe check the weather. But I didn't get far. A tag pulled me in. Callista had posted. There she was, center frame, backlit by a $1,000 chandelier, hand in hand with Julian. Her wedding dress looked even more expensive in filtered light, the caption dripping with intention. Our journey, our vision, our gratitude to those who mattered most, Hatch Rames Croft Union, Hatch blessed beyond measure. I didn't write anything. I didn't message her. I simply commented. Just those two eyes, nothing else. It was petty, maybe. It was surgical, definitely. Within 30 minutes, the likes on that single emoji outpaced most of the comments combined. People noticed. People always notice the thing you try not to say. By morning, it had tripled. While I waited for Ezra's promised gallery, I checked the post again. Someone had replied to my comment. Didn't the sister pay for the venue? I heard something wild about that. Another added, why is this giving erase the donor and run vibes? That afternoon, Ezra sent the preview link, password protected, just like I'd asked. The subject line was clean. As promised. The body contained one sentence. Let me know if anything needs adjustment. I clicked the link. It opened to a minimalist page, black background, white text, and one title in the center. A record of the invisible, captured in stillness. I clicked enter. The gallery began with the chair. That same fold-out chair by the swinging kitchen doors. The bin beside it gleamed under overhead light, stainless steel and unforgiving. Then came a sequence. Me, seated, back straight, hands resting in my lap. In one photo, Ezra had caught my reflection in a sliver of glassware stacked on a catering cart. In another, he captured a wide shot. Me framed between the kitchen and the edge of the party, the contrast in lighting so stark it looked deliberate. It was art, but it was also proof. I uploaded it, along with the link, to a Google Drive folder, saved it to 3 separate locations, and then I did nothing. I let it breathe. I didn't need to send it. The internet would do the rest, and it did. A guest from the wedding, someone I vaguely remembered from the cocktail hour, maybe a college friend of Julian's, found the gallery and posted it on Reddit. Thread title, The Woman Who Paid for the Wedding and Was Seated by the Garbage. It sat at the top of the wedding drama subreddit for 4 straight hours. By the 12th hour, it was on Twitter. By the 18th, BuzzFeed had picked it up. Callista texted first. What is this? 5 minutes later. Take it down, Riley. This is completely out of line. Then came an email. This is defamation. If you don't remove that gallery, I will be forced to take legal action. I replied to none of it. I forwarded her the invoice again. Same language, same terms. At the bottom of the email, I added one sentence. This is truth. Then I silenced her contact. It took exactly 1 day for the tide to turn. By the next morning, a stylist who had worked the event tweeted, I was there. She sat beside the trash. It wasn't a mistake. Another comment followed. We were told she couldn't attend. Then I saw her leave alone. That wasn't right. By lunch, a thread compiled all the receipts, screen grabs, timelines, seating charts from someone who had gotten a peek during planning. The narrative unraveled faster than Callista could react. Public sympathy doesn't trickle, it crashes. The gallery views doubled by the hour. Strangers began reposting the photos, quoting them like gospel. She didn't fight the room, she changed the frame. One tweet read, "You paid for her palace, and she gave you a corner to vanish in, but you turned the corner into a gallery." I turned off notifications after that. It wasn't about clout, it wasn't revenge porn, it was a reckoning. A soft knock on the hotel room door broke the rhythm. Room service, probably. I opened it to find an envelope on the floor. No one in sight. Inside was a printed note on thick cream paper. "Ms. Callan, consider this an apology, though late. Your actions have been noticed. We'll be refunding your deposit." The Croft family had no knowledge of what occurred, and we extend our regrets. No signature, but that was enough. I folded the note and slipped it inside the same envelope I'd used for Callista's invoice. Poetic symmetry. When I finally lay down that night, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exact. For the first time in days, I slept without waking. Because when the tide turns, it doesn't knock, it swallows. The world didn't fall apart with a bang. It unraveled thread by thread, post by post, share by share. It started with the Reddit thread, then the Twitter reposts, and before long, my inbox was flooded with requests from media outlets, documentary producers, even a professor from NYU who taught digital culture studies. At first, I didn't answer any of them. I didn't want to explain. I didn't owe anyone a commentary or a soundbite. The photos spoke well enough, but silence, I realized, was no longer a weapon I could use. It was a shadow Callista had already filled. 3 days after the gallery went viral, the headline made its way to major news outlets. "Sister funded entire wedding. They sat her near trash." Underneath the bold type was my photo. Ezra's photo. The chair. The metal bin. Me, unmoved. It was everywhere. BuzzFeed, The Atlantic's culture column, even Good Morning America mentioned it in a segment called Family Feuds in the Social Age. The image had a hold on people. They weren't angry because I was ignored. They were angry because they recognized the tactic. Some had lived it. Some had seen their own stories in mine. TikTok exploded. Duets of women sharing their own stories of being erased at family functions. People reenacting the moment with their own twist. Folding chairs by dumpsters in mock wedding attire. It was surreal, but it wasn't the jokes that cut. It was the truth they uncovered. People knew. And then came the hotel story. I didn't leak it. A hotel clerk, someone who must have checked me in, posted anonymously that the room Callista had booked for me was categorized under their nanny and vendor tier. No view. Budget amenities. They'd found the original internal tag still live in the system. "She paid for the venue and got a nanny room?" one commenter wrote. Another said, "This isn't neglect. This is punishment disguised as logistics." The backlash shifted tone. What was sympathy turned into collective outrage. Callista responded 2 days later. Her statement, shared via her publicist, was 2 paragraphs of polished nothing. "We regret any misunderstanding during our special day. Our intention was never to exclude, only to celebrate. We hope to move forward with love and healing." It backfired. The comments flooded her post like water breaking a dam. Say her name, or say nothing. You didn't exclude by accident. You edited on purpose. The hashtag forgotten guest trended for 6 hours straight. Then my mother called. Not texted, not emailed. She called twice before I picked up. I let her voice ring out flat through the phone, holding it a few inches away from my ear. "Riley," she said quickly, "we need to talk. This has gone too far." I said nothing. "You're blowing things out of proportion. This is your sister's life, her reputation, her marriage." I cut in. Isolde. She hated when I used her first name. It set a boundary. "I gave," I said slowly. "And you looked away." There was a long silence. She didn't argue. She just sighed. Riley? She tried again, softer now. People are saying horrible things. I didn't write them, I replied. They saw what they saw. I hung up. That evening, Ezra messaged me a screenshot. An arts column had picked up his gallery. The headline read, "Modern Diaspora, One Woman's Seat Beside America's Trash." The article dissected the image's symbolism, the layers of erasure, of race, class, gender, of silence given shape. They called it a socially surgical indictment. It was strange, being framed as an icon of quiet resistance. I hadn't intended to be a message, but once you become a mirror, people reflect what they need onto you. I went downstairs for coffee and returned to my room to find a message from one of the wedding vendors, the florist. Her name was Maya. I remembered her because she was the only one who'd smiled at me when I arrived. Her message was short. Just wanted to say, I didn't know you were family. You were the only one who thanked us. The only one who asked for our names. I stared at her message for a long time, longer than any of the viral threads. Because in all the noise and headlines, it was that truth that stuck to my ribs. They didn't just forget me. They trained everyone else to ignore me too. And now the curtain was gone. They stood naked in the light of their own narrative, and it burned. I didn't have to knock them down. They handed me the match. It was a gray Tuesday morning when I received the message from Julian's father. The tone was formal, clipped, but not hostile. A request. Would I be willing to meet, just briefly, to clear up a misunderstanding? I sat in the hotel lobby with a lukewarm cup of coffee in hand, watching businessmen pass by with polished shoes and tight schedules. The message blinked at me, unread on my screen, before I finally tapped to open it. They asked to meet at a cafe a few blocks from the estate. Neutral ground. I arrived first, as always. The Crofts came in 10 minutes later. Julian's father, Everett Croft, was dressed like he was stepping into a boardroom, not unraveling a family's image. His wife followed silently, eyes behind sunglasses, even though we were indoors. "We appreciate you agreeing to meet," Everett said. He didn't waste time on niceties. I nodded, waiting. "We were unaware you were Callista's sister," he said flatly, "and certainly unaware that you had funded the entire venue." His wife pursed her lips, like the words tasted wrong. I said nothing. "We've made inquiries," Everett continued, "and we understand that you've since rescinded that gift and requested repayment." Another nod from me. There was a pause, then the final blow. "We've spoken to our son. Given the circumstances, we've advised him to annul the marriage." Just like that. No apology, no drama, just a clean cut. It was, strangely, the most honest moment in the whole affair. I left the cafe with no sense of victory, just confirmation. Their silence afterward said more than words could. That afternoon, I went to the bank. I sat across from a teller I'd never met and requested full withdrawal of the wedding-linked funds, canceled the remaining authorizations, and placed a block on any further withdrawals from my name related to that event. When the teller asked if I'd like to leave a reason in the system, I smiled and said, "No need. That door's closed." Back in my hotel room, I typed a final message to Callista, this time without emotion, without heat. As no gratitude was expressed, all gifts are hereby rescinded. Debt remains due, 30 days, no further communication required. Then I logged off. It was over. The next morning, I booked a one-way flight home to Oregon. The plane lifted off into early dawn light, and I leaned back in my seat, eyes closed, not to sleep, but just to rest in the feeling of leaving it all behind. At the airport, I didn't call anyone. I didn't need a ride. I took a cab back to my apartment, opened the windows, and breathed the mountain air like it was something I'd earned. 2 days later, I called my eye doctor. We set a date. "It's good you didn't wait too long," he told me over the phone. "You'll see clearly again, Mrs. Callan." Funny how that meant something entirely different now. The surgery was successful, uncomplicated, and quiet, just like I wanted. Recovery took a few days. I spent them mostly on the couch, listening to jazz and rereading the letter my father had written, the one I now kept in a frame beside my bed. Then, one afternoon, a package arrived. I recognized the sender immediately. Ezra. Inside, wrapped in craft paper and careful padding, was a single black wood frame. The photo inside was the one he'd taken in the corridor. Me, seated beside the catering bins, head tilted upward, eyes calm, spine unbent. The lighting cast a quiet glow across my face. It didn't look like a moment of shame. It looked like a throne. I hung it in the living room, directly above the fireplace, centered. I didn't tell anyone it was me. I didn't need to. It wasn't about who was in the photo. It was about what it said. It's not where I sat. It's how I rose. A week later, a letter came. I knew the handwriting before I opened it. Callista. It wasn't an apology. Not really. It was regret cloaked in rationalizations. Everything got out of hand. I never meant for it to look like that. You know how much pressure I was under. She said she wished I had come to her directly, that we could have handled it privately. She never said, "I'm sorry." Not once. I folded the letter and placed it in the back of a drawer under a stack of old utility bills. I didn't respond, because I didn't need her to understand. I needed me to keep walking. The air in Ashland had changed since I left it. Or maybe I had. Either way, when I stepped off the shuttle from Medford Airport and into the familiar scent of pine and damp soil, I felt like someone coming home, not just geographically, but personally. The small rental cottage I'd signed for a month earlier sat nestled between two maples, their leaves already turning gold with the early signs of fall. Unpacking wasn't a chore this time. I didn't rush. I moved with intention, folding sweaters into drawers, stacking books on shelves in the order I planned to reread them. My eyes were strong again, crisp edges, no floaters, no pain when the light hit just right. But it wasn't just my vision that had returned. Something steadier had come back with it. The ability to choose myself without apology. In the mornings, I walked to the corner cafe where they learned my name by the third visit. In the afternoons, I volunteered at the senior center just off 8th Street, reading aloud to those who had lost their sight, which felt quietly poetic. No one asked about Callista. No one brought up the wedding. I liked it that way. Here, I didn't need to be explained or defended. I simply existed. Once a week, I met with the local book club. The women were in their 50s and 60s, mostly retired teachers or widows who had found solace in fiction. They didn't know what I'd been through. To them, I was just Riley, the new woman from the city who brought lemon bars and always had a quiet opinion about the protagonist's emotional arc. I didn't offer stories from the past. They didn't pry. One chilly Sunday, as I returned home with a paper bag full of groceries, I found a package at my front door. No return label. Just my name in familiar handwriting. Inside was a large coffee table book, beautifully bound in matte black. On the front, pressed in gold foil, were 3 words: The Forgotten Frame. I opened it slowly. Ezra. He had turned the gallery into a limited-run book. Each photo printed on thick, uncoated paper, each page given space to breathe. There I was, again and again, framed in the silence they gave me, the chair, the kitchen door, the steel bin. My face never looked bitter, just present, real. Tucked inside the front cover was a small handwritten note. Some images last longer than memory. This one will outlive all of us. E. I ran my fingers over the words. Then I placed the book gently on my coffee table, underneath a vase of fresh sunflowers. 2 weeks later, I received a postcard in the mail. The handwriting was blocky, clearly a child's. Crayon-colored hearts framed the corners. Dear Aunt Riley, we had to make a card for someone we think is brave. I picked you. I told my class you helped someone without getting anything back. That's brave. Love, Nova. I sat at my kitchen table, the postcard in hand, tea growing cold beside me. That little girl, the only one who had asked why I was sitting near the trash, had remembered me in a way her mother never did. I placed the card beside the framed photo over my fireplace, side by side, a portrait of quiet defiance and a child's reminder that I wasn't forgotten. A few days later, I read an article buried deep in the business section of a local Atlanta publication. Callista Rames had filed for bankruptcy. The article was sterile, bullet points about mismanaged funds, PR contract losses, real estate liquidation. It didn't mention a wedding. It didn't mention a sister. She wasn't in jail. She wasn't on the streets, but she had lost the only currency she'd ever cared about: image. As for my mother, she had moved into a small rental unit outside of Decatur. Word was she lived alone now. No visitors, no mentions in society pages, just space and time. I didn't feel joy reading it. I felt distance, like watching an old movie you used to love, only to realize it never really loved you back. Standing in my living room one evening, I looked at the fireplace. The photo still hung there, centered, unmoving. The light from the window caught it just so, casting a quiet glow across my face. I thought back to that hallway, the cold floor under my heels, the planner's clipboard, my sister's voice, tight with worry that I might make a scene. I hadn't. I didn't have to. They did that all on their own. And as I stood there, one hand resting on the edge of the mantel, I whispered. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of truth. They didn't ruin me. They revealed me. There was no ceremony to it, no dramatic pause, just a simple recognition that I was still standing, and they couldn't rewrite that. I didn't wish them pain. I just no longer carried them. Some names don't need to be remembered, but mine will not be erased again.